Hi folks, welcome to our program So Far Safari. I'm Ernie Misch, your host. So Far Safari examines faraway, exotic, and strange places. And today we have as our guest Joe Johnson.
Well,
Hi,
thanks
Joe.
for having me. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Glad you're here. Joe, the world is spinning. Stop the world and show us where we're going today.
All right.
Where is that?
We are going to Los Angeles and more specifically Hollywood, California.
Hollywood, California. That is a faraway, and some people may say strange and exotic
I think it
place.
definitely falls under the category of strange at times, but it can be exotic as well.
How did you happen to go to Hollywood?
It's one of my favorite places to visit. Some people like to go to tropical islands on their vacation. For me, whenever I get any time off, I like going to LA and Hollywood. I have family that live out in that area that can put me up for a little while. But there's so much to see and do when you visit Hollywood that you can't get it all done in a week, so you have to come back again.
Sure. Let's take a step backwards. How did you ever get involved in being interested in Hollywood and film?
Well, it goes back to when I was a little kid. Entertainment was, I didn't come from an affluent family. Things were tough growing up, and our main sources of entertainment were going to dollar movies at the movie theater and watching programs on television. Sometimes my mom would take the family to the dollar theater and we would see 2, sometimes 3 movies back to back to back for $1. So that was a main source of entertainment growing up, and I just developed a passion and a love for filmmaking. I was always curious about how films were made, especially when I was 10 years old. The movie Star Wars came out, and I was just fascinated with how that movie was made and the special effects.
Absolutely.
So I think that was a direct relationship to why I got into the industry. And it wasn't until high school when I was approached by a woman named Donna Learmont when I was in my yearbook, my high school yearbook class. And she asked our class if we'd be interested in producing a high school news program. We said yes. We went to the studio twice a week for training. And before you know it, I was writing it, editing it, shooting it, doing everything, and became basically the producer of the high school news program.
You were a natural.
I just took right to it. She saw my ability, and she hired me as a part-time intern, 20 hours a week. And that was my first job in the world of video production.
Great. Yeah. So then how did that develop into your current career?
It just one thing led to another. She recommended she saw a posting that she recommended to me for the city of Sterling Heights, they have a beautiful video production department there. They do their council meetings and local news and things like that. So I applied and got that job, again, thanks to my mentor, Donna Learmont. And I was with the city of Sterling Heights for about a total of 6 years. That job led to another job where I ran a public access studio in Lake Orion for a number of 8 years. And I loved being there, but unfortunately things changed there.
Of course.
And I was unemployed for a short time before I came here to CMN TV, and I've been with CMN TV for 10 years now.
Yeah. Let's go back to Hollywood.
Sure.
What did you see there?
Oh gosh, so much to see and do. There are the usual, sites that all the tourists see, and I brought photos. I don't know. Do you want to get into the photos yet?
Sure.
All right. Let's kind of go in
open up
order.
Your portfolio.
Sure. When you arrive in LA, if you fly into LAX, that's going to be your first stop, LA Airport, and they have this beautiful control tower that you see in the photograph now, and they light it up with lights and everything. So it's a pretty awesome greeting when you arrive in LA to see the LAX control tower. It's very distinct when you arrive. And one of the first stops on the tour has to be the Hollywood sign. And it seems like every time I visit the Hollywood sign, I try and get closer and closer and closer to it. One of these days, I'm going to scramble up that hill and maybe take one of the letters. I don't know. But this most recent trip was the closest I've ever got to the Hollywood sign. We probably were less than the length of a football field away from it. And it's just such an icon to see up close. Yeah. It's like a beacon that calls to me. I just can't resist visiting it every opportunity I get. The Walk of Fame, another must-see destination when you're in Hollywood. It runs along the entire length of Hollywood Boulevard, and you got to be careful not to bump into people because everyone's looking down at the sidewalk at their favorite stars. I happen to be posing with John Wayne Starr right now, who's one of my favorite actors of all time. And it's just really neat to just walk up and down Hollywood Boulevard to see those stars. And there's so many of them that now they're going off on Vine Street and some other cross streets. So not all the stars are on Hollywood Boulevard. Some of them are on side streets as well. That particular star belongs to Elizabeth Taylor, and I took that photo the day after she passed away.
Oh my gosh.
She passed away while I was in Hollywood. Oh. So I went to go see her star on the Walk of Fame, and the entire sidewalk was blocked off with tributes and flowers, and it became a memorial where fans were able to express their condolences at the loss of Elizabeth Taylor. Yeah. So that was pretty amazing to see that in person.
Right.
Speaking of the Walk of Fame, occasionally you get lucky and you get to see stars get their star on the Walk of Fame. Now, this particular photo is actually from 2005, which was my last trip to L.A., and Sandra Bullock just happened to get her star on the Walk of Fame. And coincidentally, the night before, I happened to be standing on the star that she was going to get, which was blank but covered in plastic. So I found out that she was going to be getting her star the very next day. So we went back, and she was there with all of her co-stars from her various movies and received her star on the Walk of Fame. So that was really exciting to see something like that in person. There's Grauman's Chinese Theater, the famous theater that celebrities put their hands and feet in the cement and are immortalized there at the theater. It's just a great place to visit. In this photo, again, my favorite star, John Wayne. I'm posing by his handprint, or it should be his fist print and his boot prints. And when you visit John Wayne's block at Grauman's Chinese Theater, you can't help but think about the episode of I Love Lucy, where Lucy and Ethel tried to pry out his prints with a crowbar and steal them. And that's one of my all-time favorite episodes of I Love Lucy. There's another shot of Grauman's Chinese Theater. I happen to be posing next to the Marx Brothers block that has handprints and footprints of all the Marx Brothers. So, you know, it's very historical. It's very amazing to see that from so many of the legends of Hollywood. There are costume characters at Grauman's Chinese Theater. See if you can guess which one is Superman in that picture.
Oh, I can't. Let's see. He's got a teal-colored shirt on.
Close, close. The actor that plays Superman in that particular environment, he's semi-famous because he was featured in a documentary about these actors that wear costumes at Grauman's Chinese Theater. And that's kind of how they make a living. They work off of tips and pose for photos at Grauman's. And it was interesting to meet him in person. Very nice guy. Hollywood and Vine, probably the most famous intersection in the world. It doesn't have the prestige that it used to have in the 30s and 40s and even the 50s.
That was Discovery intersection, wasn't it?
That was what?
Discovery intersection. A lot of stars were discovered there.
Yeah, exactly. I heard a story about how Lon Chaney Jr., I think it was, who played the Wolfman. It was Lon Chaney Jr., right? He used to, when he was an extra, he used to sit at a bench at Hollywood and Vine and wait for a truck to come by, and he would hop in it and go to the studios to be an extra. And later, when he became a star, he would pick up extras and take them to the studio.
Sure.
But yeah, Hollywood and Vine's, the glamour days of Hollywood was the most famous intersection in the world. And that's just one of my favorite photographs. That is actually the Guinness Book of World Records Museum. But I love that neon sign, and I'm going to turn that into a work of art that I'm going to hang on my wall.
Yeah.
The Kodak Theater, also on Hollywood Boulevard near Highland. That's where they do the Oscars every year. So what used to be on that location was the Hollywood Hotel. That got torn down years and years and years ago, and now the famous Kodak Theater is on that location. That's a courtyard next to the Kodak Theater, and there's lots of shops and dining and things like that. What's interesting about it are these large elephant sculptures that are in that courtyard. And that is a tribute to a silent film called Intolerance, which had a similar set. And after filming Intolerance, they didn't have the money to demolish the set, so it stood there as relics for years and years and years until they just gradually decayed over time.
Like the Eiffel Tower.
Yeah. So now this is just a modern tribute to Intolerance, the silent picture. There's a nighttime shot of the Egyptian Theater, which was the site of the very first movie premiere ever, was at the Egyptian, which also was created by the same gentleman who created the Grauman's Chinese Theater. And next to the Egyptian is the Pig and Whistle restaurant, which I had dinner at, and that's a historic restaurant that for a number of decades wasn't a restaurant anymore, but they just recently refurbished it and remodeled it, and now it's a really nice place.
Wow.
Happened to be walking along Hollywood Boulevard, and I stumbled onto Marilyn Monroe right there. Actually, that's a wax figure from Madame Tussauds Wax Museum, and I was actually startled when I saw it on the sidewalk. It looked so realistic. So I couldn't help but pose for a picture next to Marilyn and pretend the paparazzi is hounding us. Speaking of Marilyn, one thing I tried to do when I was out in L.A. is I visited her hand and footprints at Grauman's, her star on the Walk of Fame, her home in which she passed away. That's on the bottom left corner of that image. And finally, on the bottom right corner is where she is entombed today. That's her final resting place. So that's 4 different stops on my Marilyn Monroe tour. And the top center is her actually putting her hands in the wet cement. That's just a shot as you drive along throughout Hollywood and LA and Beverly Hills area. It's just amazing to see those tree-lined streets. It's just looks like a postcard. It's really amazing. That is me and my buddy Marv, who went to Hollywood with me. We're at the famous Formosa restaurant, which has been used in a number of films and is actually an historic restaurant that goes back quite a ways. An interesting story about the Formosa is one day when John Wayne was having dinner there, he had too much to drink and passed out, and he was too large to move. So they left him there. They locked him in, and when the owner came in the next day, they found him in the kitchen making breakfast for himself. But it's a pretty famous restaurant, and my friend and I are sitting in the Elvis Presley booth. That booth was used exclusively by Elvis Presley when he dined at the Formosa. That's the Warner Brothers studio. While in Hollywood, I toured 2 different studios, Warner Brothers studio and Sony Pictures, which used to be MGM. So while touring Sony Pictures, we got to see where they did The Wizard of Oz and things like that. So the history there is just amazing. While at the Warner Brothers studio, my friend Marv and I got to sit on the couch that was used in the TV show Friends. That is Central Perk, the coffee shop that was featured on the TV show Friends. And also at Warner Brothers is a car museum. And among the many cars that are on display there is Clint Eastwood's Gran Torino, which I was excited to see because that movie was filmed here in the Detroit area. And I had to go all the way to L.A. to finally see the car, despite the fact that it had been here in Detroit. While at the Sony studio, they had what they call the Ecto-1 from the movie Ghostbusters sitting in a parking lot. They were using it for some scene that they were filming. So I was excited to see that in person. The Griffith Observatory, famous for many reasons, but fans of James Dean know the Griffith Observatory because that's where they filmed some scenes for Rebel Without a Cause. So if you see this side-by-side picture, I'm standing in the spot where James Dean had a knife fight in the movie, and it hasn't changed all that much.
Wow.
As a matter of fact, at the observatory, they have a bus dedicated to James Dean right on the property. Also in the Griffith Park area is this pretty famous tunnel that's been used in numerous movies, but the side-by-side comparison you have there is scenes from a movie called Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and that tunnel led to Toontown, and so that was pretty exciting to see that in person as well. Also in the Griffith Park area is the famous Bat Cave. On the old Batman TV show, whenever you saw the Batmobile leaving the Bat Cave, it was actually coming out of that tunnel that you see there in the Bronson Caves area. And I brought my little toy Batmobile just for perspective. But it was exciting to visit the actual Bat Cave. And speaking of the Batmobile, I got to visit the original Batmobile that was used on the TV show. It was on display at Barris Custom City. Barris is a guy who originally designed and remodeled the Batmobile for the TV show using a 1955 Lincoln Futura. So it was amazing to see that car in person and up close. One of the things I tried to do in Hollywood was visit famous locations that were used in movies and television. That particular apartment building behind me was used on Seinfeld. Most of the exteriors on Seinfeld were filmed in New York. For some reason, they found an apartment building in L.A. and used exteriors from that apartment building to represent Jerry Seinfeld's apartment building. So I stood outside waiting for him to buzz me up, but he never did. That particular home on the outside was used for the Brady Bunch TV series. Of course, all the interiors were shot on a soundstage, which I happened to get to visit back in 1990. I actually stood on the set of the Brady Bunch, which was really exciting. But that particular home they used for exteriors. An interesting note is that the Brady Bunch home had 2 levels. This particular home only has 1 level. But when they shot the exteriors, they put a fake window on the wall to make it look like it had a 2nd floor. Here's some side-by-side comparisons from some locations from the movie Back to the Future. This particular home is known as the Gamble House from the Procter & Gamble empire. It's a very exotic-looking mansion, and that was used as Doc Brown's house in Back to the Future when Marty traveled back in time to 1955. And it's open to the public, so we were able to go up on the porch and knock on the door without disturbing anybody. There's a mall in the City of Industry known as the Puente Hills Mall. Back to the Future fans remember it as the Twin Pines Mall, where they used the time machine for the first time, and Marty was chased by the Libyans before he traveled back in time. So that's an active mall in the City of Industry, but any fan of Back to the Future will instantly recognize it as the mall from the movie. And this particular location is the McFly home, where Marty's family lived in Back to the Future. And so that's a residential home that just happened to be used as the McFly home in the movie. And the street in front of the house where they filmed some scenes of the time machine driving down the street and going back in time. So that was a fun location to visit. Hopefully we didn't disturb anybody.
Well, speaking of disturbing people, do they mind when people come by and photograph the neighborhood and do this
I
kind
would
of thing?
imagine the homeowners have to be aware of the fact that these homes are famous and they're going to get visitors.
Right.
The Marilyn Monroe home that I visited, the home that she actually died in, they actually changed their wrought iron fence into a big, solid wall so that people can't peer in. So some people probably feel like their privacy is being invaded, but
they're sensitive to it.
Most people, I think, seem to be okay. The people at this particular church were really friendly and allowed me to get access to it. That was a church used in the finale of The Graduate with Dustin Hoffman when he disrupts the wedding at the end of the movie. And if you look closely on the right side, you'll see me standing in the exact same spot where Dustin Hoffman stood there and banged on the glass and yelled, "Elaine, Elaine." Right. So it was really neat to stand there in his shoes in the exact same church. And as you can see in the pictures, it really hasn't changed that much since the late 60s when the movie was made. This particular high school, some scenes were used in the movie Grease. They actually used 2 different high schools. This is where they filmed the climatic scene at the end with the carnival, and they sang, "You're the one that I want," and that sort of thing. It's changed quite a bit over the last few years, but it's neat to know that that's where scenes from Grease was filmed. There's me sitting in front of the home that was used as the exterior of the Cunningham house on Happy Days. So it was fun tracking that down. Here's me at the Music Box steps. It's a long flight of concrete steps that were used in an Oscar-winning Laurel and Hardy short. And the surroundings have changed a little bit, but the steps haven't changed that much. So much so that I was able to place myself in the scene with Laurel and Hardy, and you could feel their presence there when you're standing on the ground.
So they weren't really there.
They weren't really there, but their spirit was. As a matter of fact, there's Laurel giving me a kick in the seat of the pants.
He looks like he's there.
And there's a side-by-side comparison of what the steps looked like in the original movie. Gosh, I think it was 80 years ago that movie was filmed. And to the right is what the steps look like today. Speaking of steps, another long set of steps in the LA area was used in a Three Stooges short where it's called An Ache in Every Steak, and Curly had to deliver ice up a long flight of stairs. He started out with a big block of ice. By the time he got to the top of the stairs, it was a little ice cube. The stairs are relatively unchanged in the 70-plus years since that short was filmed. So I was able again to position myself on the stairs and put myself in these scenes. There's me sharing the screen with Mo, and it's amazing how little has changed in that particular area. The cul-de-sac, the storm drains, the steps, the handrail are all exactly as they appeared in the film. There's the grave sites of all Three Stooges. My friend and I are big fans of the Stooges, so we made a point to pay our respects to all Three Stooges. So there's Mo, Larry, and Curly, whose birth name was Jerome Howard. So we visited all the grave sites of the Stooges. When you're in LA, you want to visit the beaches. Redondo Beach is one of my favorites. It has a beautiful pier with restaurants and shops. Flock of pelicans flew overhead, which you don't see every day when you're from Michigan.
And in formation yet.
Yeah, and pelicans, they look like pterodactyls when they're flying overhead. It's pretty amazing to see. There's me standing in front of the pier of Redondo Beach. It's one of my favorite places to visit. Santa Monica, that beautiful pier with the Ferris wheel and everything, a popular tourist destination, and the last stop on Route 66. And near the Santa Monica Pier is what's called the 3rd Street Promenade. And shoppers walk up and down these streets which don't allow traffic. And there's shops and restaurants, and the trees are lit, and it's just spectacular. If you ever get out to Santa Monica, visit the 3rd Street Promenade. Venice Beach, definitely a must-see for tourists when you visit Venice. Lots of characters. Oh, it's incredible to see. There's Venice Beach, beautiful palm trees and shops and restaurants. And there's the waves crashing on the rocks at Venice Beach. And I believe that's our last photograph. And just a beautiful shot to end the slideshow on. But that was a lot of fun.
Well, I know in addition to just visiting Hollywood, you are really a part of Hollywood.
Oh, I guess. My heart's always there, I suppose.
I know, but a while ago you told me that you were actually an extra in a famous big film.
Yes, and that's why I feel so strongly about the motion picture industry coming to Michigan. It gives people a lot of opportunities to be part of that, and creates jobs and for extras and people that work in other aspects of film.
Was 61 shot in Michigan?
It was. It was filmed at Tiger Stadium. The director was Billy Crystal. The movie was actually filmed for HBO and is now available on DVD. It's one of the best baseball movies I've ever seen, and I'm not saying that just because I was an extra in it.
Oh, come on now.
It's a very good baseball movie about Mickey Mantle and Roger Maris, both playing for the same team and going for a home run record in 1961. But the Yankee fans turned on Roger Maris and were rooting for Mickey Mantle to break the record. So the fans were booing one of their own players.
Wow.
So it's an amazing story, and I ended up in 9 different scenes.
How did you happen to become an extra?
Well, there was a call put out to people from the Detroit area to apply to be an extra. And I had made several phone calls and wasn't able to get through. My very last attempt, I got through, and the person on the phone said, "Do you have any acting experience?" Which I did. And so they made me a reporter in the film. So there were scenes where I'm standing on the field with all of the actors, interviewing the Yankee manager, played by Bruce McGill. And it was an exciting time. I ended up working for 2 weeks on the film. It was very exciting to be part of that.
I always thought once you are an extra, you become recognizable and they don't want you to back.
Well, that is a rule. You have to be careful about being seen too much when you're an extra in a movie because they don't want the same faces. So I was a little sneaky. I kept changing my look repeatedly. When I found myself in one key scene, I'd go back to wardrobe, change my glasses, change my wardrobe, and wind up in another key scene.
And so you were actually in disguise.
I tried to be, and halfway through the filming, I remember at one point Billy Crystal said, "Are you new here?" And I had to be honest and say, "No, I've been here for a week or so." But he said, "All right, well, just stay where you are."
I've never seen you before.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Another connection with Hollywood is your car collection.
Yes.
Would you talk about how you developed that and what's such a fervor that you have for this collection?
Well, being a fan of movies, I grew up with movies like The Cannonball Run and Smokey and the Bandit and things like that. On TV, there was The A-Team, Knight Rider, Starsky and Hutch. And the one thing all these TV shows and movies had in common were these amazing cars.
Yeah.
So since I couldn't afford real-size replicas of these cars, I would buy the little ones.
Yeah.
Hot Wheels, Matchbox, Johnny Lightning, and start a little display of famous cars from television and film. Well, I decided one day to photograph my collection and create a little website. Little did I know that right off the bat I was getting close to 1,000 visitors a day to my website. And I found out that there was a huge following and people with similar interests were visiting my website.
Yeah, you're not the only one.
Exactly, and it was nice to know. So the website's called HollywoodDiecast.com. It's led to all kinds of opportunities. As a matter of fact, my last trip to Hollywood was to be flown out there to be interviewed for a TV show and talk about TV and movie cars. So that's been a lot of fun to express my love of TV and movie cars.
Yeah. What is that website?
Hollywood-diecast.com, and talks about latest movies that are coming out that feature cars, and all the collectibles and toys and stuff related to those cars.
There's one other connection to Hollywood that I know you have, and that is you have produced, written, and directed and produced an award-winning, money-winning short.
That's right.
How did that happen?
Occasionally, when I do have time, I like to work with friends on short films and help them shoot them and stuff like that. But a few years ago, I wrote and shot my own short film called The Big Game, where I play a guy who wins the lottery and tries to become Batman. And when I do, I go out to fight crime and I wind up in the hospital. So it was a lot of fun shooting that, and I submitted it for a film festival in Indiana and ended up being one of the winners of the film festival. So I took a trip out to Indiana. They played my short in front of a live audience, and it got all the reactions I was hoping it was going to get, and I ended up winning a $500 prize and a little
congratulations.
trophy. Thank you. So that was a highlight. People keep demanding a sequel. Maybe one of these days I'll do a sequel, but if I can find time.
Yeah, and you said also that you work with our other friends on their shorts.
Yeah.
And some of them are, I've seen some of them, they're great.
I have some pretty talented friends. A lot of them I've met while working in the field. And Gary Bozek, he's a fan of The Twilight Zone and Rod Serling, so a lot of his shorts have this, mysterious feel to them, a little twist at the end. So I really enjoy helping out my friends on their shorts when I can.
Joe, it's been wonderful.
Well, thanks for having me.
I'm glad to hear about Hollywood, and I'm glad to hear about your involvement and your passion for Hollywood and everything to do with Hollywood.
Well, thank you very much. I enjoy it.
Folks, that is our program for today. We're glad that you're here, and I want to turn to our feedback segment. John from Knoxville, Tennessee writes, I have seen your work before, Ernie. Your programs are good. Glad to see you are still being creative. And Jay from Rochester Hills, Michigan writes, nice show concept, Ernie, with good inquisitive interaction with your guests. And Daryl from Dexter, Michigan writes, it's good to see a commercial diver that passes out real information. Thanks. We're glad to have your feedback. It's what makes us better. For So Far Safari, I'm Ernie Misch. I'll be seeing you some sunny day.